Start.
We do it? Okay. Hey guys. Wow, what a beautiful day it is. It was a bit hot earlier, now it's a little overcast, and I think we'll bring it in. Excellent speech by Dale there, and Kirby did a wonderful job too. I don't know, there you are. Now look, I was given an interesting topic, thanks to Anne-Marie. I wasn't sure what to think of it at first. At first I was very excited. Sexual behaviour in the human male. Wow, sex, I've heard of it, I haven't had much of it, but I thought, you know what, let's figure it out. And I was looking into this and I'm like, okay, this wasn't so much of an experiment as a survey sort of thing. It was a contrast between two surveys. The first guy, Alfred Kinsey, a lovely guy here with a young girl. I don't know what he's doing, but he seems like a nice guy, but we'll go into that soon. And then another guy, Robert Michael and his colleagues. A few different methods, a few different conclusions, but we'll go into that. All right. Now, Kinsey. He started off as a biologist. He had his PhD in Harvard, and he started studying gall wasps and their behaviour and their mating behaviour and that sort of thing. And he thought, you know what, why don't I apply this way of thinking to humans? That was in the 30s, and then he started teaching a sort of marriage course at his uni. And during this time, he was collecting sexual data, partner data from his students, and he was starting to get a bit interested, maybe a little bit obsessed with this sort of thing. And this is when he started to study sexual behaviour of humans. So he published his study in his first one in 1948. That was sexual behaviour of the human male. Before that, we had Piaget and Rogers. So look, we already had client-centered therapy. We already understood children and their development. Before that, we had that other bloke that Kobe was talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Good thing we had a little break between this study and yours. Yours was about children, mine is too. Robert Michael, a little bit different, bit further on. More comprehensive study, a lot more wider population groups, really methodologically sound. So Kinsey's was a bit like people looked at it and they're like, ugh, you know what I mean? But they're like, all right, this guy seems like a sick cunt. You know what I mean? This guy, they're like, oh, this makes a bit more sense scientifically. Anyway. Oh, God. What a lovely looking chap. Now that's Kinsey. So he collected a lot of sexuality data. How did he do this? He sat down face to face and he interviewed people. And what was actually wonderful about this is that he used what was called a non-judgmental approach. So there was no bias, there was no, oh, your behaviour is sickening, or it was just, hey mate, have a sit down, like, what gets you going, like, this, like, do you like goats, you know what I mean, like that sort of thing. And he collected a lot of different data from different populations. Now, his hypothesis was that there was no such thing as an unnatural attraction. The only thing that was unnatural was something that you couldn't be attracted to. So if I could drill a hole in this wall, that would be unnatural. Anyway, printers, whatever, like, it's fine. There's a printer there, it's a good looking printer. Anyway, so the problem with his research was he interviewed a high percentage of criminals, homosexual prostitutes, sex offenders, things like that, and there was something a bit strange about it, because in the data, it's like, oh, okay, this all seems kind of normal and people are into this sort of stuff, and then you realise, wait a second, this guy's a bit cheeky. He was interviewing pedophiles and homosexual prostitutes, so it makes you think, like, hold on, what's this guy? Maybe there's a hidden agenda there, And then as you look into the research, he was being funded, by the way, by the Rothschilds. And then when they saw all this stuff, they sort of stopped funding him. Like, later on, after people looked into his shit, they were like, oh, this guy's fucked. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's go on. Look at that goat. Like, how cute. It's so cute, right? It's gorgeous, yeah. You wouldn't do anything to it, you know what I mean? But believe it or not, there are people that find this attractive. And if they saw that, they'd get a stiffy. Now, these people are more likely to live in rural areas, and Kinsey actually proved that. Actually, 50% more likely to have sexual relations with an animal if you lived in a rural area. That was one thing he discovered, which is quite interesting, actually. I mean, it makes sense. There's not many people out there, you know, like, I mean, yeah, come on. Anyway, I don't know. Pretty cute, actually. I'm starting to get a bit. Also, before Kinsey's research came out, it was highly stigmatized, taboo, all this sexuality. It was based on superstition, religion, all this sort of thing. Like, you know, everyone was like, oh no, you know, being gay is so terrible and all this sort of thing. But Kinsey actually found out that there's a lot more gay people than we thought. And there's not just gay people and straight people, it's a spectrum. So according to Kinsey, everyone's a bit gay. I'm sorry guys, but it's just, that's what he reckons. Yes, also there was a stigma on masturbation, and he found that actually masturbation is quite common. I mean, I could have told him that. Anyway. Also, premarital intercourse is common, you know. I mean, I'm trying to tell this to my girlfriend, but you know what I mean? It's funny. Anyway. Okay, next one. Now this is a Kinsey scale. Since then it's been developed, but as you can see, exclusively heterosexual, exclusively homosexual. He hypothesized that most people are somewhere around here. And then you've got like asexual people, right? Great. Now this is what he was, this is what I found a bit disgusting in his research. A lot of stuff came out about this sort of stuff. He did a lot of research into pre-adolescent orgasms. So, for example, let's look at this data here. You know, a 12-year-old had 14 orgasms, and it took 38 minutes to have the orgasm, right? And then there was another data point. He's found there was a 4-year-old that had 26 orgasms in 24 hours. And then I'm just like, hold on, how did he get the data? You know what I mean? I'm like, fuck mate, look at this cunt. Bro, look at him. Come on man. You know what I mean? So, yeah, let's just get rid of that face. Actually, so, okay. So, he got this data from a lot of pedophiles and stuff, right? And he used this data that was obviously cherry-picked to push his agenda. And that, you know, all this taboo stuff is like, oh, it's not a big deal, you know, like some people are attracted to kids. And it's okay, and we shouldn't criminalise them, you know? And he was trying to get people, like pedophiles that are in jail to like sort of get their charges dropped. So I reckon he was a bit of a pedo. Anyway, very disgusting. So that's Alfred Kinsey, guys. And that was the beginning of sex research, really. Before this, there was nothing really publicised. So he was seen as like a hero almost, like a pioneer. But then when you really look into it, you're like, oh, I don't know about this. Then again, it was for science. And like, sometimes these like psycho, unethical dudes, they get a lot done. I don't know if we needed that research, to be honest. They're like 4-year-olds. On the contrary, this was a bit of a more positive study. So we didn't have much development since then until Robert Michael and his colleagues released Sex in America. Basically, Kinsey caused a lot of damage to sex. It was already taboo. Then he released all this information, and then everyone was like, oh, he's encouraging all this terrible thing. Like, we're not funding any more sex research. Not to mention like the religious aspect of it, right? Like, if you're Catholic and Christian, why would you fund this guy that's pushing like homosexuality and all that, you know? These guys came along. Originally, they were like, oh, AIDS, it's terrible, let's figure it out. That's why they did this. They wanted to figure out, how do we stop the spread of AIDS, what's causing AIDS? And then they started this survey. It was more comprehensive. They picked a lot more different population groups across America. They used questionnaires people between the ages of like 18 and 55 or something like that. Their research was more scientifically sound. Like, if you could imagine a classic scientific experiment, there was more control. Like, it wasn't just like, okay, let's interview some pedophiles. You know what I mean? And the study was better received in the scientific community. Yeah, 90-minute interview. Yeah, about 3,000 people. A decent sized study. Quite different population groups. Yeah, what did he find? Actually, really interesting one. One of the most, this is what they hypothesized, right? So let's break it down. Religion was a minor contribution to sexual behaviour, but like when you look at the data, it actually showed that religion did have a bigger impact, you know what I mean? Like, and 50% of the people that were religious definitely agreed that religion impacted their sexual behaviour. But the most important statistic was like how old you guys were, and if you were partnered, right? So if you were single, married, whatever. And religion had a strong negative view between homosexuality and masturbation, right? Now, okay, forced sex, terrible subject, right? Women, he used the term forced sex, it's rape, we're talking about rape here, okay? 22% of women had experienced this, we found. Only 3% of men had admitting to forcing their partner, and 4% of the rapists were strangers. Now, a weird statistic, the highest number of people that were raped were actually raped by their partner who they were in love with. And people who were raped, they had a really high likelihood of having sexual dysfunction in the future, so it really fucking affected them. And if they were molested as children. So, just let's look at that data, for example, right? Now, go back to Kinsey. He collected data on hundreds of kids, yeah. And in that data, he also recorded their reactions to sexual stimulation. A lot of it was kicking, screaming, shouting, all that sort of stuff. So you can imagine the amount of psychological trauma he caused in those kids. So it's not a good thing at all. Homosexuality. So Michael identified 1.4%, 2.8% women as homosexual, bisexual. There was a problem. He didn't get many Jewish people, that's a Jewish person. And because there's not many homosexual people in the Jewish population, that information wasn't used. So it was a really diverse study, but it was more Christian, hetero sort of population. Yeah. And then we had findings on AIDS, all right? If you were gay and you used IV drugs, you're more likely to have AIDS. Anal. Yeah, you know what that is, guys? Don't do it, you get AIDS. If you do it, wear a condom. But look, he said gay people and IV users are more likely to get AIDS. But then I'm looking at it and it's 10% of hetero men and 9% of hetero women, did that disgusting activity in the last 12 months. So, and they didn't include college students, military personnel, prison population, and the rate of infection might be greater in those groups. Conclusion, Kinsey, good and bad. I don't know if we needed to know that a 4-year-old can have 26 orgasms in 24 hours, but we do now. Besides that disgusting stuff, he did sort of start the whole sexual liberation process, but he caused a big negative impact on future sexual research. And a lot of these future sexual researchers were tied in with him, were oh no, he's going to be like Kinsey, he's going to be a filthy bastard, you know what I mean? Before Kinsey's research, sex was based off superstition and religion. Now there was some science behind it, but there was no real hypothesis in Kinsey's data. Michael sort of pushed it a bit more, and I think he did a really good job. His data was more truthful, and we got more out of it. And his book emphasised how sexual behaviour and relationships are more socially patterned, which is quite interesting. I think the next step, and which what they started doing, is research based on arousal. So, for example, if I hook something up to your genitals, like some electrodes or what have you, and then I show you a picture of like a good-looking woman, do you get a stiffy? You know, if I show you a picture of a goat, do you get a stiffy? You know what I mean? That makes more sense to me, and I think that is better, and we should go in that direction. There are issues with that, however. What if I show you something that might be unethical, and then you know you get aroused from it? Am I encouraging that behaviour? You know, I don't know.
Time up.
Time.
Thank
Yeah.
you.